Shalom and welcome to this special edition of the Middle East Report, Israel at War. And in this program, we'll be discussing how Israel's National Emergency Service, known as Magen David Adom, came under fire from Hamas on Saturday, the 7th of October. And this is their story. Warm welcome. We have two special guests joining us today, representing the incredible work being carried out by Magen David Adom. That's Israel's National Ambulance Service, plus also the Israeli Defense Force. So in this program today, I'm joined by Daniel Berger, who is the Chief Executive of Magen David Adom UK, together with Uriel Goldberg, who's not only an Israeli paramedic, but also a member of the IDF. Daniel, it's great that you can join us on the Middle East Report, so thank you for being here. I know that now is an extremely difficult time, not only for Israel, but also for the Jewish community here in the UK. But share with us your thoughts of where were you on that fateful day, which was Saturday, the 7th of October, and how did you hear the horrific news that Israel was suffering its worst mass terrorist attack in its history?
Yes, thank you, and thank you for having me back on, Simon.
Pleasure.
It's bizarre, isn't it? It's still surreal, still struggling with the concept of actually what happened on Black Saturday, or whatever you want to call that day now. And quite literally, about 7:30, I woke up and went to check my phone, and there was a message from one of my team members, and she said, in the UK this is, on our team WhatsApp group, saying, if there's anything I can do to help, let me know with what's going on in Israel. So of course I'm looking at this and thinking this is the most bizarre, cryptic message to receive, 7:30 on a Saturday morning while still in bed. So I go to the news feeds, I go to the MDA WhatsApp feeds, and of course being 2 hours ahead of Israel, I'm really seeing the horrific atrocities start to unravel and play out on my phone.
And Yuriel, it's great that you can join us. I know that you're only in the UK for a very short time. After this program, you're getting a flight back to Israel, but you are a paramedic belonging to Magen David Adom. You're also a reservist in the Israeli Defense Force, and we're discussing that role as well. But share with us how you first learned about what can only be described as a pogrom, a war crime, genocide committed by Hamas. And reality is now that it's believed that 3,000 Hamas terrorists carried out this massacre against those southern communities in Israel. So share with us how you first learned what was actually taking place and developing on Saturday, the 7th of October.
So first of all, Simon, thank you for having me back. So for us, it started what was actually Simchat Torah, which is one of the happiest days in the Jewish holiday, in the Jewish year. Me, my wife, and my new 3-month-old baby.
Congratulations.
Thank you. We're at my grandparents in Netanya. At around 6 o'clock in the morning, we woke up because the baby woke up. And whilst my wife was feeding him at about 6:30, our phones just started exploding from messages. We started receiving alerts. In the beginning, it seemed like it was a rocket attack. It seemed like there were hundreds of rockets being fired at Israel. Very quickly, we realized there was something more there. We started seeing videos of terrorists flying into Israel, tractors destroying the fence. And then we started receiving more reports about the number of people injured and killed. It was then that we realized that we had to go back. We had to go back home. I had to drop my wife and kid off at home before preparing to be called up. And that's how the morning and the war started for us.
Shocking, absolutely shocking. And Daniel, how did Israel's National Emergency Service, Magen David Adom, respond to this crisis, with knowing that Hamas terrorists have murdered over 1,400 Israelis, taken over 240 as hostages and taken them back into Gaza, and then 4,000 injured, and many of those critically? How did MDA respond to that horrific day?
So I think what's really important to remember is the statistics you've just quoted are things we know down the line. At the time, playing out in real time, MDA had no idea about the hostages, about the number of fatalities, or potentially the number still to come. So immediately it put itself on 100% operational capacity, which means every single vehicle, every single medic, every single paramedic was brought onto duty, and they were in this impossible situation, which we know that medics around the world have to work with. The definition of what's a hot zone, where can they operate, where can't they operate, where's a terror zone? And so this was all playing out, as I say, in real time. So still people very, very unaware at this point of the total gravity of the situation. But the bottom line is MDA were ready for deployment immediately to save lives.
And Yuriel, just share with us, as an Israeli, when the news became evident of the atrocities that were being committed by Hamas, and we have to say that they are beyond horrific, particularly what happened at Kibbutz Barrett and Kibbutz Kfar Aza, and having visited those communities last December, I visited Kibbutz Narim, which was also attacked, that was so close to the Gaza Strip. These are beautiful Israeli communities, beautiful kibbutzim, amazing people, and then to understand the horrors of what they went through, which was, you can only describe this as something out of the Holocaust 80 years ago. Share with us how Israel's reacted to all this, because it's so important that we hear so many different narratives, but we need to hear the Israeli narrative.
So first of all, I'll just say that they were beautiful kibbutzim. I was down there in the first week after the war started, and as you said, it looks like a war zone. These were peaceful communities. These were communities of people who lived by the border, who believed in peace, who believed in living side by side. And you see the destruction there. You see that when the Hamas terrorists came in, their sole intent was to cause as much damage, to cause as much emotional damage, and to kill as many as possible. That's what they did, murdering over 1,400 people. You see the scenes there, and it's almost impossible to believe that this could happen in 2023. As an Israeli, it's been difficult to process. As I said, I've been down there. I've had soldiers who had to go and deal with the bodies. They were helping to identify, and even last week they found a tooth of a 12-year-old girl who had been missing, and this was the only remnants they found. To find any kind of sign of existence even. It's been difficult to process. It's difficult. We're still working through, and it's going to take a long time.
I can imagine. Well, our thoughts and our prayers are with you and the Jewish community as well at this horrific time. I'm just going to show you this excellent video produced by our friends at Magen David Adom, and this is how they need your help.
Israel is at war. Our citizens are scared. We need your help so that we can protect them in these trying times. Volunteers and workers of Magen David Adom have been working non-stop and under fire to save lives. We suffered loss of friends, volunteers and staff, our ambulances, also the assault of Hamas terrorists. Help us provide the emergency medical support that our country needs so that we can continue to help on scene, transport our patients to hospitals, collect blood donations, and provide pro bono first aid courses so that our country can feel ready and safe. Your donations will help civilians and save lives.
1 month ago, on the 7th of October, 16 Magen David Adom ambulances were targeted and destroyed by Hamas terrorists bent on inflicting death and suffering. We remain determined never again to let it happen that the people of Israel will be waiting for our help. That's why we need your help. We need 300 new ambulances to boost and to replace our supply. We need 100 new bulletproof ambulances so that no matter the danger, we can get to patients, treat them, and transport them as fast as possible. Thank you for helping us in this important mission.
And there's no doubt that MDA needs our support, they need our prayers, they need our solidarity. and also need our finances in order to make a difference in Israel. Daniel, just share with us, I've done quite a few programs with you, and it's been an absolute pleasure to do programs with you on the Middle East Report, sharing the story of the incredible work being carried out by Magen David Adom and those who work for MDA. But share with us how, for example, this is something that no other Israelis have experienced this before. I mean, this is literally the worst terrorist attack in Israel's history. And not only were effectively paramedics going into a war zone, but they also had to contend with all the rockets and missiles that were fired on Saturday the 7th, over 2,500, which parallels the south of Israel, like Israeli cities such as Ashkelon. Share with us how MDA paramedics prepare themselves to go into these awful emergency situations.
It's a great question, and I'm sure Uriel can add to this, but the question is, how do you prepare yourself? And I think we've got to reflect now on things we know, and what we know is, in this instance, in this horrific act of genocide, the terrorists were only there to murder, to maim, to kill, and to take some hostages. But what we've got to remember above all else with this is their MO was to go in and to stop MDA in its tracks before. So we know that its attempts were to destroy MDA ambulances. They wanted to cause as much damage as possible. They wanted to ensure that MDA's vehicles couldn't get to the front line. And along with that, they were shooting at and actually murdering 11 of our medics. Now, you have to remember, Uriel's wearing a shirt with the red Star of David on it. This is a protected emblem under the Geneva Convention. Now, they're Hamas, they're terrorists. We accept they don't follow the rules of war, but they're shooting at MDA medics. They're shooting at a Red Cross vehicle and Red Cross people. So their only intention was to stop MDA in its tracks. And so I guess your question about how does MDA prepare for this? Well, here they're dodging bullets. It is an horrific act of genocide that has shocked us all to the core. And MDA is literally fighting not only to save lives, but it's fighting for its own people's lives as well.
Yeah. And Yuriel, as a paramedic, how do you prepare yourself for something like this? I know that we recorded a program back in 2021, and you talked about your life being a paramedic with MDA in Israel, but also we also discussed how to prepare yourself for a terrorist attack in Israel. Now, I don't think anyone could have comprehended what could have happened on October the 7th. I think it's just unbelievable that anything could actually happen like that. I know that the back of your mind, the back of most Israeli minds, that was probably there, but no one actually expected it. So share with us how your fellow colleagues at MDA and those who lost their lives, what they would have gone through to go and help those who were fatally wounded by Hamas.
So I agree with you 100%. I was thinking before the show back to our show in 2021, and we spoke about what to do if you find yourself caught up in a terror attack. I don't think anyone imagined this would be the situation which anyone in Israel would be dealing with. We knew there was going to be a war, we knew there'd be rockets, we knew there'd be an attack, but I don't think anyone believed that they would reach this level of brutality, where the only thing which Hamas was looking for was to strike fear and terror. So we prepare for all kinds of incidents, mass casualties, training under fire, rockets. There is one person I want to point out, Amit Man. You mentioned Kibbutz Be'eri a couple of minutes ago. Amit Man was a 22-year-old paramedic from Kibbutz Be'eri. She had recently finished a national service as a paramedic in Magen David Adom. She found herself in Barrett on the morning when the attack started. She collected a number of wounded people in a surgery, and for 6 hours was trapped there with the patients, keeping them alive until unfortunately Hamas terrorists stormed the surgery and shot her whilst she was saving lives. For a number of days we didn't know whether she was alive or kidnapped, or whether she was dead, and a couple of days later we found out the awful news, probably better than being kidnapped. But that's what our MDA staff were dealing with. This was heroism. she was trapped. She also had the opportunity to run away at the beginning. She chose not to. She chose to stay and to try and save the lives of some injured patients there. And that's what it is, being a paramedic.
And Daniel, I mean, these. I was aware that one of the ambulances was shot. I think we got a video footage of showing Hamas terrorists actually shooting the tyres of an ambulance, and we got some other footage later of showing one of the ambulance shot up, and some of them are actually burned. But why have we not heard any international condemnation on attacks on Magen David Adom, which is part of the International Red Cross? Because there's silence. I haven't heard virtually no media coverage on this whatsoever.
Now we get into the great debate of the media and what they choose to cover. There's been some coverage of it, but I think MDA hasn't been very vocal on the world stage about the destroyed vehicles. Amit definitely has been out there on the world stage, and we've actually seen the US ambassador to the Israeli ambassador to the UN use her as a case study and highlight her heroism and what she did in the UN.
And this is Israel's ambassador to the United Nations and also the director of MDA in Israel, talking about this brave and courageous paramedic belonging to MDA.
מדינת ישראל נמצאת במלחמה. מגן דוד אדום הוא הזרוע הביצועית להצלת חיים במדינת ישראל. אנו פועלים במשך 24 שעות ואנחנו נמשיך לעשות זאת בצורה יעילה, מהירה, טובה ומלאה.
עמית מן, a 22-year-old from Kibbutz Be'eri and a paramedic for Magen David Adom, Israel's Red Cross. When the Hamas monsters invaded the kibbutz, Amit ran to the clinic to treat as many wounded as she could. For hours, Amit worked non-stop trying to save lives. She knew the sadistic terrorists were outside her clinic because she heard the gunfire, but she stayed there. She was committed to saving lives, not running away. This is how the rescue teams found Amit.
And it's shocking how the world is silent regarding the deliberate murder of paramedics belonging to MDA, also part of the International Red Cross. It does raise a serious question, Daniel, as well. This whole issue, how do you respond as an organisation such as MDA, where your whole duty is to save lives? It doesn't matter if they're Jewish, it doesn't matter if they are Muslim or they're Christian. The whole role of MDA is to save lives. So when we know that MDA ambulances are coming under fire from Hamas, this is a war crime, isn't it?
Absolutely. There's no doubt this is a war crime. I said earlier, it's a total breach of the Geneva Convention. But how do you expect terrorists to abide by rules of law? These are not human beings playing out fairly. They are monsters, barbarous acts of terror. And they don't care. They are only there to maim and to cause as much death and destruction as they can. And I think this is the fundamental problem. And I think this is what the world woke up to on the 7th of October, realizing that these are the most abhorrent, heinous crimes committed. Joe Biden summed it up on his visit. He said it's like 15 9/11s all at once.
Absolutely. Uriel, share with us how one of your own paramedics was shot, in this case, Aaron Himayov, who was shot on his way to treat victims in his hometown of Ofakim. And he was only 25 and was married and a father of 2. Share with us the appalling loss of 11 of these brave and courageous paramedics that put their own lives on the line in order to save the lives of others.
So I think Aaron Chaimov is a great example of, again, heroism under fire. He left his house early in the morning, left his wife and 2 children in order to go and save other people's lives, people who he'd never met. We retroactively found out there were also Bedouins, Arabs, Muslims who were injured and murdered as well by Hamas. To Hamas, it didn't make a difference who they were killing. As long as the person lived in Israel or was in Israel, to them it was a legitimate target. But to go back to what Daniel said, I don't think we can expect anything more from Hamas. We do expect more from the UN and from the Red Cross and from the international media to condemn and to mention these crimes which have not been mentioned, have not been spoken about enough. So thank you to you for giving us the opportunity here to speak about it.
No, it's vital. Absolutely vital. You know, this is a war crime, and now that because of Israel's incursion into Gaza to destroy Hamas, the narrative's changed, and so many journalists actually forget what happened on the 7th of October. The narrative moves on, and then like, well, this happened last month, and don't reflect on the horrors of what actually took place. And it's so important that when we actually are discussing the horrific events of Saturday the 7th of October, that we have personal accounts and eyewitnesses of what happened. And in this case, this is such an eyewitness account of one Israeli paramedic shares his experiences of what he went through, which was literally hell.
אני ליאור לוי, פרמדיק במד"א ירושלים, נשוי +4. ב7 לאוקטובר הגעתי למשמרת בוקר בגוש עציון, כאשר לפתע אחראי המוקד מתקשר אליי ואומר לי להתחיל לנסוע לכיוון הדרום. הכנו את עצמנו, שמנו שכפ"צים, קסדות, התחלנו לנסוע עם אמבולנס ממוגן ירי לכיוון הדרום. בדרך אנחנו שומעים דיווחים מצוותי מד"א שמפנים פצועים קשה. כל פעם יש פינוי של פצוע קשה אחר. הבנו לאיזה כאוס אנחנו הולכים, לאיזה בלגן אנחנו הולכים. הבנו שמדובר באירוע אחר. הגענו לאיזה צומת סמוכה לאשקלון, הגיע אלינו רכב, פרק לנו 3 פצועים קשה מירי, רב מערכתיים. התחלנו לעשות להם טיפולים מצילי חיים. אחרי שהצבנו אותם בשטח, פינינו אותם לבית חולים ברזילי באשקלון. סיימנו בבית חולים ברזילי, ניקינו את הדם מהאמבולנס, יצאנו לכיוון צומת זיקים.
אני חייבת אתכם לכיוון צומת זיקים, יש שם 5 פצועים קשה.
טילים נופלים לידינו, יורים עלינו, ירי של קלאץ' ואתה מרגיש את הכדור, אתה שומע את הכדורים חולפים לך מעל הראש. וזה כל שנייה טיל. כל רגע אתה שומע בום מצד שני, אתה מסתכל לשם, אתה רואה עשן, אתה שומע בום, אתה מסתכל לשם, אתה רואה עשן. עם רסיסים על האמבולנס, משהו מפחיד. ראינו גופות זרוקות, גופות של אזרחים, גופות של אנשים מבוגרים, של ילדים קטנים, דברים שאני אישית לא אשכח בחיים שלי. חד משמעית, הרגשתי שאני יכול לאבד את החיים שלי. והתקשרתי לאשתי ואמרתי לה שתיתן נשיקות לילדים ויש מצב שאני לא חוזר הביתה.
תתפללו חזק, אנחנו מטפלים בפצועים תחת אש, יורים עלינו ואנחנו מטפלים, אתם לא מבינים מה הולך פה במקום הזה.
יצאנו לכיוון צומת זיקים, צה"ל העביר לנו חייל פצוע קשה, כדור חדר את הקסדה, פגוע ראש מירי, מעורפל הכרה, בן 19. ברגע שהעלינו אותו לאמבולנס התחילו לירות עלינו מקלאץ', שמענו ירי של קלאץ', כדורים חולפים לנו ליד הראש. סגרנו מהר את הדלתות והתחלנו טיפול מציל חיים, והוא היה באי שקט, הוא התחיל לבעוט בכל דבר, ונתנו לו תרופות להרגעה, ונתנו לו תרופות לעצירת דימומים, ונתנו לו תרופות להרדמה, ונתנו לו חמצן ופינינו אותו לבית חולים. הוא היה מעורפל הכרה במצב מאוד 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 קשה. אני אישית לא נתתי לו יותר מדי סיכוי. מאז שזה קרה, אני כל הזמן חשבתי מה קורה איתו. ולפני יומיים אמא שלו מתקשרת אליי, ואומרת לי לפני יומיים אמא שלו מתקשרת אליי ואומרת לי שהוא בהכרה כרגע ושהמצב שלו טוב והוא אוכל והוא מדבר. יש לו עדיין שיקום מאוד 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 ארוך, אבל לדעת שעשית הכל להציל חיים והצלחת. יש את ליאור לפני ה7 באוקטובר ויש את ליאור אחרי ה7 באוקטובר. אנחנו אנשים שונים וזה לנצח יישאר ככה, כי מה שחוויתי שם ומה שראיתי שם יישאר בי תמיד.
And we really do need to pray for those brave and courageous Israeli paramedics, those who are serving with MDA, who are literally putting their lives on the line to save others, and that was such a case. Daniel, having visited the town of Sderot and those beautiful communities in the south of Israel, and as part of the Christian Media Summit last year, sponsored by the Israeli government last December, we had the privilege of visiting Kibbutz Narim, and we met the leaders of the Eshkol Regional Council, and we met the residents there in their beautiful kibbutzes and their beautiful gardens, and effectively saying that 90% of the time to live here is paradise. But when those rockets and missiles go over, it's hell. But it's like Saturday the 7th of October was like the gates of hell being unleashed on these beautiful communities. Share with us the story of how Hamas deliberately targeted this town of Sderot that has literally faced rockets and missiles ever since the Israelis pulled out of Gaza back in 2008.
So yeah, look, we've all known for years, and when we think about towns on the border, Sderot is the one that everyone sort of turns to. You've got that media platform there. I was also there very recently, and last week actually, and one of the things that's really telling and really interesting is we talk about Hamas, we talk about their attempts to take out MDA to stop them being able to save lives. What we now know, and we've been shown this by MDA, is they found a dead Hamas commander in the Sderot, and on his person were orders in Arabic with a map which they've now translated, and the orders were for his group to go and take out the station, like they did with the police station. So their sole purpose was to take out and destroy everyone at the MDA station in Sderot. And thank God that didn't happen. And only a few weeks later, I'm sitting in that very station talking to the crews, who it could have been a very different set of circumstances on that 7th.
And Uriel, how do you prepare yourself for the fact that that you're actually a target as a paramedic? I mean, it's one thing being a soldier, because you know as a soldier, and you are a soldier in the IDF, and we'll talk about that in a minute, but share with us, as a paramedic, you don't expect to be a target.
So I think anywhere in the world, a paramedic expects to have some kind of pass and knows that they're protected. The fact that we have a Red Cross symbol, the fact that we're there to save lives, and again, it doesn't matter whose life it is. I think Israel is one of the only places in the world where we know that we're likely to be a target. We prepare for it, we train for it, but mentally it's very difficult. It's very difficult when you know that friends and people who we've trained with in the past and did courses with were shot and murdered because they were paramedics, because they were Israeli. So it's difficult to prepare for it. MDA has always, I think I remember Daniel a couple of times when we were on trips in Israel, and we would show the groups the bulletproof jackets and helmets. People were a bit shocked. Why does an ambulance need a bulletproof jacket and helmet?
And bulletproof ambulances.
Exactly.
Let's not forget
exactly.
this.
And in certain areas we have bulletproof ambulances because we're one of the only countries in the world where civilians are targeted, paramedics are targeted, hospitals are targeted, and that's something which Israel and MDA has prepared for years.
Yeah. I'm going to just ask you something which I think really has come into its own, hasn't it, Daniel, recently, and that's the newly built National Blood Centre. Considering that Israel's had to respond, and MDA in particular, to a mass terrorist attack, how valuable of these has the National Blood Centre that's just been built and it's become operational been effective in this situation?
Well, I mean, sadly, every theory about the need for this has been proven right. And ironically, it only became at full operational capacity the week before the 7th of October. It's a big transfer to move all of this capital equipment and to move everything from one blood centre to another. And they literally got it finished at the first week of October. So pretty much when the time the 7th came, they were already in.
That's extraordinary.
And of course, it's number one, it's protected, and we've talked about this before, but protected against terror and rockets, and protected against earthquake, both of which we've seen this year. But it's also for capacity. The population growth of Israel has superseded the previous blood centre, and what we've seen is blood donations during this time go up 5-6-fold, and people, Israelis, queuing for hours in key strategic points of the country to give blood. And this all needs processing, and there is no way the old facility would have been able to cope with that level of blood and that volume.
I've seen, I think that on the day after, a couple of days after in Tel Aviv on I-24, the Israelis just queuing up in the big queues to actually offer blood because of the situation. Yuriel, can you discuss your other role, and that's a reservist with the IDF and stationed in Jerusalem as part of the search and rescue team. So share with us how you were called up after October the 7th and your role within the Israeli Defence Force. And we admire you guys, and we're praying for you guys because you're doing such an amazing job.
Thank you. So we were actually called up on October 7th, a couple of hours after the war started. when we saw the amount of rockets and missiles being fired at Israel, we knew there was a chance that we'd be needed. Our role is search and rescue, and again, we're in Jerusalem. Jerusalem's a mixed population. A rocket doesn't differentiate between East Jerusalem and West Jerusalem. A number of rockets landed in the Jerusalem region. Thankfully, there wasn't too much damage, and no one was killed, and very few injured. So we weren't needed for our search and rescue capabilities. We've used the time to train, to prepare. We've been let off for a short while. We could be called back at any moment and anywhere in the country. So we've been using the time to make sure we're fighting fit, make sure all of our equipment's up to standard, and that we're ready to go. Thankfully in Jerusalem, we haven't been needed yet.
And just share with us, can you, for our viewers as well, the coordination between the IDF, the Israeli Defense Force, and the work of Israel's National Emergency Service, which is Magen David Adom?
So the coordination has been there since the beginning. MDA knows how to work with the IDF in day-to-day time and in wartime. I think it started now during the war, the IDF and the Israeli police going into areas where MDA couldn't because they were being shot at, bringing injured out to MDA, who were then evacuating them by helicopter and ambulance to hospitals, treating them and saving their lives on the way. To now, with the blood services, the IDF is assisting MDA, manning the blood sites, preparing everything that's needed. It's a very, very close coordination. As you said, I'm in MDA and in the IDF, and we have a lot of staff who do both, and it works well together.
Yeah, and also the very important question I need to ask you regarding this one as well is that, Israel called up, or the Israeli government called up, 360,000 reservists. Just share with us the impact that has on MDA, on the paramedics and those working for the organisation, because those roles need to be filled, don't they?
So the roles do need to be filled. I don't know the exact percentage, but over 50% of the paid MDA staff actually get called up to the army. For various different roles, from paramedics to combat medics, which is a big challenge. It's a big challenge for a national EMS service, which is taxed on a regular day and working on over 100% capacity, to then in wartime when you're under a lot of pressure. So the IDF and MDA have got a partnership, and the IDF takes employees and volunteers from MDA, but gives them back also trained paramedics and EMTs and ambulance drivers. And phlebotomists to help keep up and manage with the day-to-day work.
Yeah. And Daniel's the Chief Executive of Magen David Adom UK, based here in London. Just share with us how your branch, the UK branch, has responded to the massacre of the 7th of October.
So all we can do here in the UK is offer our thoughts, our prayers, our solidarity, our love. But actually, when it comes down to it, and we talk tachlis, as we say, as we talk business, it's fundraising, it's offering money. Eli Ben, the DG of MDA in Israel, summed it up with the diaspora societies. We are the front line on with the support out of the diaspora. So I would implore anyone to support us, to go to our website, MDAUK.org, and support, because that's all we can do. That's all you can do to really help from the diaspora. And the support from the community has been phenomenal. The love across our communities, as you know, we have a very established Christian Friends branch as well. And so our love from the most right-wing religious Jews to our most liberal Jews to our fantastic Christian friends has been really something that I personally have taken away and said, there is a love of Israel, there is a solidarity, and there is a support at the moment.
Yeah. Uriel, have you seen that support from around the world, particularly from branches of MDA throughout the world? But also I've seen videos, for example, on American Friends of MDA, how churches in the United States have just set up a big fundraiser. They got a picture of all those who've been kidnapped by Hamas, and doing big fundraisers, raising awareness of what's going on, organising nights to honour Israel. What has been your sense, the international response to this crisis from friends, both Jewish and Christians, for MDA?
So first of all, it's been very heartwarming to see that we have friends around the world. to see what people are doing on all levels, from prayers, support, sending pallets of equipment and warm clothes. It's been extremely, extremely heartwarming, and it makes it easier for us to do our job when we see the amount of support which we have around the world, because it's not always felt, especially when you look at the mainstream media. We don't always feel like people have our back. And this has been a way, and the donations which the MDA friend societies around the world have collected has just, in addition to the actual equipment, ambulances, and life-saving equipment which is being sent to Israel, it means the world to us.
Yeah, and I'll tell you a little bit of story. So on the literally a week after the horrific atrocities that occurred by Hamas on Saturday, the 7th of October, I was in Brighton. I was invited to actually speak on behalf of Vision for Israel, which is Barry and Batia Siegel. And Barry got up to speak, and he said, literally, my heart is crying for what's happening in Israel. It took them almost like 24 hours to get out of Israel. They had to fly from Tel Aviv to Madrid and then come to London for the conference. And he shared, look, we're in a desperate need. I've decided to buy and donate an ambulance to MDA, and I haven't got time to allow this to be shipped. I'm flying out directly. Just share with us the kind of international response from so many Christians around the world to helping Israel during this hour of crisis.
I mean, Barry is a textbook example of an amazing philanthropist for MDA, and you're absolutely right. He said, I'm buying an ambulance, but I want it to go now, and his, along with 18 other vehicles, were flown out of JFK into Ben Gurion, and so it cut down the freight time considerably because MDA needed these ambulances. And I told you I was in Sderot a couple of weeks ago, and one of the ambulances I saw was one of the Fellowship of Christian, the ICJ ambulances.
Yeah, ICJ, yeah.
And it was bulletproof. It is bulletproof, and it's brand new. And we've talked about how you don't shoot at medics and how you don't shoot at vehicles. This vehicle was less than a month old, and it already had a bullet hole through the passenger door. In the passenger door, not through it, thankfully. What I was told was, had this have been a regular ambulance, it probably would have been fatal for the medic or the paramedic, because it's an intensive care unit in the passenger seat. So again, Christians support buying vehicles that they shouldn't have to buy because of the Red Cross symbol, but literally saving lives. And as I said earlier, this isn't just about saving the patient's lives. These vehicles, which come at a huge cost over a normal ambulance, are saving the staff's lives.
Yeah, and Daniel, share with us your personal visit to Israel, in which you were joined by the TV personality Rob Rinder on the 12th of November, because we know that he's such a passionate supporter of the work of MDA.
It was a surreal visit. From the moment we arrived at Ben Gurion, we're walking down, and anyone who knows Ben Gurion knows you have that long walk down to passport control, and this is 5 o'clock in the morning, and literally both sides I'm seeing photos of all the hostages lined up. And not just the hostages, but also intertwined with this are the signs saying shelter this way. So I'm really seeing an understanding from the minute I got off the plane what 240 hostages looks like, and the fact that there is a real need to visit the shelter. And that set the tone and set the scene for the visit. And I think our 36 hours, and I'm speaking for Rob as well here, were incredibly tough. Rob told me he's been and seen some incredibly tough war zones, like Sierra Leone, for example, but this visit was the toughest for him, and I found it incredibly harrowing, actually, but also I'm glad I went. Hearing from these superheroes on the front line, whose stories we've filmed, just remarkable people put into situations they would never imagine, and how they were able to deal with it. And one of the stories, I'm going to share two short stories, please.
Please do. Yeah, thank you.
We met two young dispatchers in Ashdod, in the region, who were handling a lot of the inbound calls on that fateful morning. The first one showed me footage from her phone. When she arrived, she took just a screen grab of what the dispatch center screens look like, and the calls coming in were off the charts. Instead of a few per hour, red calls, which are serious alerts, this is like ping, 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 constantly. And then I was talking to Sharon, a 25-year-old dispatch shift manager, and she took a call from Yonatan, an 11-year-old boy, whispering. And she said, "Why are you whispering? I can't hear you." And he said, "I'm under my bed. Hamas are still in the house. They've murdered my mother, my father, my brother, my sister." And so this 25-year-old is now dealing with a situation she's not qualified to deal with. She is telling him to stay calm, stay quiet, and hopefully, and thankfully they did, the terrorists left the situation. And she stayed on the phone until the police arrived. And this is the boy who, sadly, for all the wrong reasons, was picked up by the international media, pictured with his grandmother burying his entire family. It beggars belief. And when we hear this, it's just beyond shocking, actually. It's horrific. What do you say to this person? What do you say to Yonatan in this situation?
And Yuriel, we know that Israel is a very small country. Everyone knows each other. So share personally how your family's been affected by this and your friends have been affected by what's happened, because it's so important that we get these stories out. They're horrible to go through, but they're so important because each person that were murdered by Hamas needs their story, and their narrative needs to be told.
So I think in addition to those who were murdered and injured, which everyone in Israel has, family members or friends and neighbors who have been murdered either in the army or in a terror attack, when 360 or 380,000 people are called up to Miluim, people often forget the unsung heroes, the wives and the children who are left at home on their own, who have to deal with red alerts, rockets, sometimes with babies at home, and that also has a strong toll. It takes a toll on the families who are left behind, on the soldiers who are in the army, who are going into Gaza, who have to worry about their family at home. And I think, especially going forward from now, we're going to have a country full of people suffering from PTSD, people who have been on the front line, people who were affected by terror attacks. And it's given us the opportunity, and will give us the opportunity to come together as a country. I think it's something which Israel, going forward, will put the pain aside. We will have our Memorial Day, we'll have our Remembrance Day, but I think we'll come out of this stronger than ever before.
Oh, absolutely. And Daniel, I also want to touch a little bit on the plight of your community as well. I mean, I don't think we've ever seen what we've seen arise since the 1930s, and this is just an outpouring of Jew hatred on our streets, whether it's London, whether it's Manchester, or whether it's Birmingham, or whether it's Glasgow, or whether it's Cardiff or Belfast. The response from this has been horrific. I mean, we've seen the pro-Palestinian demonstrations taking place outside the Israeli outside the Israeli embassy in London, and this was before the IDF were even sent into Gaza, and Israel was still clearing up the Hamas terrorists still in Israel. Share with us how critical these times are, and how much your community also needs support as well from Christians to stand up and tell the truth of Israel's righteous cause, but also to show love and support to your community at this time.
Yeah, a lot of questions there. I am, as a Jew in the UK, personally, I'm struggling with it. I'm struggling with knowing that my son, who goes to a Jewish school where he's got Hebrew writing on his jumper, has to come home, and if he's going out afterwards, we need to make sure that he's changing. And we live in a relatively secular Jewish area where we've never felt this before. And we're thinking about avoiding going into town with the kids. Others are saying, not us, but other people are saying, should we be taking our mezuzah off the front door? Do we want to make sure that our home is not openly obvious and visible to being a Jewish home? So notwithstanding the public visceral hatred at the moment, which I think a lot of it is still born out of ignorance, it's the personal. And I think that is the bit that hits us harder than anything. And how do I explain to my 9-year-old son, how do my wife and I sit there and explain to them, and our 13-year-old, what this means and why they have to be more careful? It's incredibly difficult, and it's something I'm still struggling to process with the right words.
And Uriel, yeah, your grandfather was a Holocaust survivor. He showed me a picture of him before the start of the program, and very keen to interview him and for him to tell his remarkable and incredible story of surviving the Holocaust and defeating the Nazis. But share with us what your family here in the UK, especially your grandfather, going through right now, as we're seeing levels of Jew hatred rise. I mean, a 500% increase compared to this time last year. It's just horrific.
Yes, as we were speaking before the show, my grandfather's a 93-year-old Holocaust survivor. He was a child during the Holocaust. He went through a number of ghettos and camps and came to England after the war. He's very appreciative of being accepted in England. He built himself a life, a business, a family. He was actually in Israel, and as I mentioned, we were at them for the holiday when the war started, and it took about a week before they were able to get back to England, and again, it was difficult rearranging their flights. He now said he felt safer in Israel than he does now in England, which is actually extraordinary for someone who went through the Holocaust, who we grew up on Never Again, which I personally think has no meaning nowadays. I think what we see in the press, what we see in the streets, especially here in London, shows that Never Again isn't true. It could happen again. People will look the other way. Thankfully, there is a large Christian community and supporters who won't let it happen. But it's scary being here, and especially for him, and I hope you're able to interview him as well. It's scary for him to see history happening again.
Absolutely.
And I just wanted to pick up, I completely get what your grandfather's saying, because when I was in Israel, you know, I mean, I say I felt safe, relatively safe, because I'm still wearing PPE and a bulletproof helmet, but we're surrounded on the whole by the majority who are our friends, the one big family we talk about that is the Israeli society. We come home and we're not amongst friends at the moment. And so I understand what he's saying, because that's how I was feeling as well. And Rob and I talked about this very thing on the plane coming home, and how we both, there was the irony that we felt safer in a war zone than we do at home amongst enemies.
I think the difference now between now and the Holocaust is now we have Israel. We have a place, we're able to defend ourselves, and realize that if we don't stand up for ourselves, we're going to need to stand up for ourselves. And nowadays we have Israel for that.
100%.
Yeah, and you have our complete total love and support and everything else in order during these very difficult times. But practically, though, Daniel, what does MDA need in Israel? I mean, we're talking about, was it like a huge number of ambulances that were destroyed that need replacing? Obviously, the need in Israel is huge, particularly as Israel's at war against this genocidal terrorist organisation, Hamas.
Yeah, I mean, the need is twofold. Firstly, there is a need for increased equipment. As vehicles are running at 100% capacity, that means, and the blood bank is running 4 or 5-fold, that means every usable consumable item, whether that be a blood bag, a testing kit, a bandage, a tourniquet, they need to be replenished. And so MDA, we know it's costing them approximately £250,000 additional per day to be running at full capacity. And this is something where we are asking people to help. Yeah. Then, in addition to this, it's the vehicles. And it's not just the destroyed vehicles. What we've seen, to use that awful C word, COVID, what we've seen over the last year and a half, 2 years particularly, is supply chain issues, delays to new ambulances being shipped in. So you have a mix of 100% operational capacity, vehicles that are no longer fit for purpose that should have been replaced, and destroyed ambulances, meaning that MDA is desperate for new ambulances as soon as possible.
We've got 5 minutes left of the programme, and you both are doing a great job representing MDA and also the IDF. But Daniel, just share with us how the International Red Cross has been very silent when it comes to the hostages, and what role the International Red Cross can play in looking after the welfare of those that have been taken hostage by Hamas. And I can't begin to even imagine what they must be going through as being captives and held by Hamas in those horrendous tunnels, and who knows what situation they're in.
Yeah, it's an horrendous situation, and I'd pick up on what Uriel said before about with Amit, sometimes it's better off to be dead than it is to be captured by Hamas. the ICRC, the International Committee of the Red Cross, has a duty of care, and it should have access to prisoners of war. Now again, we talk about Hamas are not a government, they are a terrorist organisation and they don't play by the rules. But the ICRC needs to, and in fairness to it, it has been calling for immediate access and of course the release of the hostages. Now the difference here is we as a Jewish community feel that the ICRC has not done enough. It's silent, and you look at the protests, you look at the placards, you look at across the diaspora, and particularly in Israel, saying, where are you? This is history repeating itself. There is silence from the ICRC. Now, personally, as MDAUK, which is a branch of Israel's Red Cross, it's not strictly speaking true. Where I think they are failing dismally as the ICRC is their lack of empathy and lack of communication with the Jewish community. And my chair and I wrote a relatively damning letter recently, an open letter to the president of the ICRC, calling for more action, calling for better communication, and frankly calling for that empathy. And we have a meeting with her in Geneva coming up next month.
Excellent. I pray that that goes well. But also, this is a time politically to be aware as well, isn't it? I mean, I'm not getting in. This is not about party politics. This is about saving the lives of the one and only true democracy in the Middle East, that is the nation of Israel. There is a beacon of a light in a very, very dark region of the world, and it feels like that region has got darker and darker now after the atrocities against Hamas. And of course, we're seeing rising levels of Jew hatred. What can our viewers do to support you, Uriel, and your fellow paramedics and those belonging to the IDF?
So I think in addition to what Daniel spoke about the funding and ambulances, for us, what helps us on the front line, and what I mentioned earlier, is heartwarming to see the level of support, to see people praying and rallying around Israel, around the world. For us, that gives us the fuel to continue doing what we're doing, to continue saving lives. And I think that's it. Solidarity, support and prayers is what's going to help us get through this very, very dark time.
Yeah. I mean, it's almost a strange situation we're in, isn't it? Is that not only does Yuriel and MDA paramedics and those in the IDF need our help and support, and particularly those precious Jewish communities, Israeli communities in the south of Israel that are having to rebuild their shattered lives after the Saturday the 7th of October, but also your Jewish community as well needs help as well during this time to make sure that you are not feeling alone, that members of parliament are speaking up against this rise of Jew hatred and not tolerating it, and the Home Office and the police need to do more and stop these awful incitement that we are seeing in these protest demonstrations that are just fueling hatred and anti-Semitism.
Yeah, I think you're right, and I think look, we don't want to get into politics. There's a lot of front benchers that are very strong pro-Israel, pro-Israel's right to defend itself, the fact that it shouldn't have a ceasefire and debates between ceasefire and humanitarian pause. And I'm grateful as a Jew that we have this level of support. There should be more of it, of course, but we have some of it, and it's just very, very challenging times. When I wrote my blog recently on my trip, I ended by saying and concluded, I think I've realised it's okay to say I'm not okay, because I'm not okay. Our fellow, our peers, my peers are not okay, and I know, having spoken to people in Israel, they are far from okay. And really, now is the time to say, it's okay to say, we're not okay.
Yuriel and Daniel, thank you so much for being my guests on the Middle East Report, and thank you for the amazing work that you do, not only with the IDF, but also with MDA, and also Daniel as well. You have our total support and admiration, and our prayers are with you as well at this difficult time. And I want to thank you for watching at home. I think we've unpacked some of the challenges that are faced by Magen David Adom in Israel in saving lives, and how they've come under fire from Hamas. And at this time, they really do need your help, and you can show that love in a practical way by supporting Magen David Adom. So thank you for watching this week's edition of the Middle East Report.